Facebook family. Hello, YouTube family. This is Reverend Dr. John Wilson III bringing you the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, September 1st. The lesson is from Genesis chapter 19. We'll look at verse 1, then we'll go to 15 through 26, and then we'll look at verse 29. The title of the lesson is called Faith in Doubt. Faith in Doubt. As I was reading this lesson, I was figuring out, okay, what does this lesson mean to me? What's it trying to say? And this is what I came up with. It's an interesting lesson. It's a sad story. We're trying to glean what lessons learned. And I believe that sometimes Christians too, we know the world does, but even Christians, we think we're really smart. We think we're clever. Sometimes we think we're smarter than God, or sometimes if God doesn't come right away, we think we've gotten away with something. We think we look out for our best interests and become very selfish. And that's not where God really wants us to be. And sometimes we think long as it's working for us, we can keep on doing that. But we know there's a God that we reap what we sow. Sooner or later, God is very patient. He's very long-suffering. But at the right time, he'll act swiftly. And he'll even bring justice into our lives. And we make our mistake, and I believe Lot makes this mistake in here. He tends to overestimate himself and underestimate God. He overestimates himself, underestimates God. In other words, he's looking out for himself and at the same time has very little fear of the Lord. And that's not a good thing. So that's what I think the lesson is about, is this right here. But as we get to chapter 18, we see that God has had a conversation with Adam, and he's telling Adam what he's going to do to Gomorrah. He's going to wipe everything out. And Adam begins to plead with him about finding one righteous person. Is there 50? Is there 40? Is there 30? Is there 20? Is there 10? Will you spare them if you find 10 righteous people? So God said he'll spare him if he finds one righteous person. And so at that point there are two men. It started out with three. Three came and visited Abraham, and he showed him great hospitality. But at this point here, after he talks with the Lord, two of them head towards Sodom and Gomorrah to inflict God's punishment on them. Sodom and Gomorrah is a very wicked place. It's an evil place. It's a place of immorality, especially sexual immorality. And God has reached his limit. His patience is gone. He's ready to act swiftly and put judgment on them. So he sends these angels, these messengers. Some versions may say messengers, but they're really supernatural messengers, or really angels that are coming to inflict the penalty or the punishment on Sodom and Gomorrah. So if we pick up in chapter 19, it says, two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in at the gate of Sodom. And then, so we have here, these men have arrived in the evening time, and then Lot is sitting at the gate. And many people have asked, what is Lot doing at the gate? He could be there on business. He could be there just sitting and talking among the other people. And some people may believe that he may be a mayor or have some position or influence in the city of Sodom, or cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's sitting at the gate. But whatever the reason is, he's there, and he sees these two men. And the Bible says he saw them, and he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and to wash your feet." So we have verse 2 talking about how he greets them. And so he looks at them, and I guess he can tell by looking at them the same way what Abraham did when he saw them, came and bowed. They look like they're men of importance. He can tell that they were different, much different than the men in Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he bows down to them in hospitality. And what he does, he says, "Come to my place and spend the night with me." They say, "I'll stay in the city square." He pleads with them and convinces them to come into his house and spend the night. And when he does that, a custom, a Middle Eastern custom, or even a Hebrew custom, is that when somebody comes and spends the night in your place, you're responsible for their safety, you're responsible for their security, you're responsible for their well-being. And the Jews or the Hebrews at this time were very keen on hospitality. That was their mainstay, and that's even true today. So what happens here, um, as Lot is speaking with them, the men of Sodom and Gomorrah, or really Sodom, they come and they see these two men. They recognize that they're outsiders. They recognize that they are new there, and they come and they say they want the men for themselves, and they say, "Come, let the men come my way, so I may get to know them, so we may get to know them." And to know them brings in a sexual connotation. They are not trying to know them relationally; they're trying to know them in a sexual way. Some people say they're trying to know them in a way of rape or something to that effect. I think it's a little bit of both. They want to know them, meaning they want to have a sexual relation with them, and then if they don't, that doesn't work out to be voluntarily, then they want to force themselves on this man. And so this is the type of wickedness that is occurring in uh, in Sodom. They are, what I would say, sexual immorality is going on, and more specifically, it's the sin of homosexuality. And that's the problem there. And I believe this is the main thing that God doesn't like what's going on there. It's other things that are going on. You can imagine a wild lifestyle, all that kind of stuff. No regard for him. He's just God is not even included anything. But this is the one that tips it over, and God said has to stop. And so he says, bring them to us that we may know them. I'm going to go out of line with the passage says. I think this is important. And this is what Lot says. He goes out to the men at the entrance, shuts the door after him, stands outside and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. So you can see that they say that we may know them. And then you see how Lot responds to them and saying by them wanting to know them or have sexual relations with them is one of acting wicked. A lot of people are more your liberal scholars will say to know them doesn't mean that, but the connotation here is that the way they want to know them is an act of wickedness. And so we know it's an act of sexual immorality. And that's the problem. That's the characteristic of Sodom right here. And so what Lot does, and Lot's hang up is that he has 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in God, in the church, or 1 foot in the temple, or 1 foot in the tabernacle, or 1 foot in worshiping God. He's a divided individual. You have to remember that in chapter 13, he pitches a tent in Sodom. In chapter 14, he makes Sodom his home. And so you have a man that knows God, but chooses to live in a place like Sodom. Something's wrong. Something's not right. That just doesn't point a clear picture. And the issue is that he's comfortable there. He likes it there. Remember he had a choice to. Abraham gave him a choice of what direction he wanted, what type of pasture he wanted, and he chose the pasture towards Sodom because it looked the best. But my thing is today is that some things may look the best, but it's not pleasing to God. Something may look the best, but it may come to bite you a little bit later. It's going to come to bite Lot a little bit later. This is what this plan is outlining. So what he says, which is despicable, which is inexcusable, which is it exaggerates the custom of providing safety and security for your guests. It overrides that. It goes beyond what that really meant. And so he offers up his daughter instead of the man. He offers up his daughter for them to have sexual relations. He tells they have never been married. They're virgins. Take them and have your way with them. And the problem with this is really twofold. One, these are his daughters, flesh and blood. This is not what that custom meant. This is immoral. What he did was wrong. And as we were to read this passage, these daughters were engaged to be married. So why would you do something like that just to save these men? He did not have to do that. In fact, the people, these men of Sodom, they rebelled. They were homosexual. They did not want women. They wanted men. And the Bible says they went after Lot himself. They said, I'm going to do worse to you than I would have done to the man. They were aggressive. They wanted to hurt these messengers, these angels they could not have. They didn't know who they were, but they wanted to help us. So they go after Lot. And so then the angels have to save Lot, strike the men blind at the door where they can't find the door, grabs Lot physically, brings him into the house, and saves him. Terrible situation. Terrible situation. Sodom is a wicked place. And so what we have here is that the angels or the messengers are warning Lot that he must leave. They must get their stuff out and get ready to go early in the morning at sunrise, because this place is going to be destroyed. He says, so Lot went out to his son-in-laws and were to marry his daughters. Lot goes to them and says, get up out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy this city. But he seemed to his son-in-law just to be joking. So they tell him, he tells his son-in-laws reject it. And then this brings us to 15. As the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. So that the angels get Lot up early in the morning. Time to go. Time to get your wife, time to get your daughters, and time to get out of here before you get caught up in this terrible punishment that's going to happen to this city named Sodom. But the Bible says, but he lingered, meaning that he delayed, he stalled, he didn't move fast enough, didn't have enough urgency. For some reason, he stalled. And so the man seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand. And these are the angels that seized him. And my question is that why did he linger? Why did he stall? I mean, that's a dilemma. We don't really know for sure. But if I know Lot is materialistic. He likes things. He has settled into Sodom. Some scholars believe that he met his wife in Sodom, because we never hear about him going there with a wife. So he may have even married his wife in Sodom. And then we know for sure that his daughters there were going to marry Sodomites, men of Sodom. So he had got real comfortable. I believe Lot had a very nice house, had a good lifestyle. I believe he had valuables that were in there. I thought when they said leave and go and leave everything behind, I think it caught him off guard really about the urgency of it, and he had to think about what he was leaving behind. That's what I believe. So it says, and he lingered. I believe he believed the men, but I just think he lingered because of what he was leaving behind. That's my opinion here. And the Bible says he lingered so much that these messengers, these men, these angels had to seize him and his family by the hand. They had to physically touch them, physically grab hold of them by their hand and take them out of the city. And it says here, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. The Lord being merciful. That means giving Lot something that he did not deserve, or not punishing him when he deserved being punished. Being merciful because he could have easily perished with the rest of the people in Sodom. He was living with them. The Bible never says up to this point that Lot was a righteous person. Later on in Hebrews, it does say that. But up to this point, Lot is not a righteous person, not by God's standards. Abraham is, but that is not being said by Lot. And later on, we'll find out the real reason why God had mercy on Lot. It was nothing that he did, or not even about who he was. It was more about who Abraham was than who Lot was and his family. So in an act of mercy, what God does, he pulls Lot out of that desperate situation. And men, these angels, take him outside the city so he can ultimately be saved. And I was thinking about that. Didn't God do the same thing for us? We were deprived, caught up in sin, caught up in our own trespasses, doing our own thing, living a life of immorality, doing this and doing that. And God grabbed us in an act of mercy, grabbed us, changed our heart, took us out of that situation to a place of salvation. This is what he does for Lot. Give him salvation. This is what he does for us. Gives us salvation. Something that we do not deserve. Something that we did not earn. Something that we could not earn. So he says here, he sets them out the city. And as they brought them out, one of the angels said, escape with your life. You're free. Go. Get out of here. Run. Go as fast as you can to the hill country, because this place is about to be torn up. And if you remain here, you're going to perish with them. And he gives them instructions. Do not look back. This is to all of them. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. Giving them a warning. Giving them clear instructions on what to do. I don't think you can be any clearer than this. It's almost like the Garden of Eden, that eating off that tree, that forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil. Do not eat of that tree. It's about as clear as that is. It says, do not look back. Do not stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills. And if you don't do these things, you'll be swept away. That's some good instructions. And this is what Lot does. Lot seems to be a contrarian too. He says, oh no, my lords, surely not, my lords. Behold, I acknowledge that I have found favor in your sight. I have knowledge that you have shown kindness to me. I acknowledge that you have even saved my life. I acknowledge those things, but I cannot escape to the hills fast enough. Because if I go on my own speed, and I won't make it, and I'll be swept away in this disaster. So he says that this disaster will overtake me, and I will die. So you got to remember, Sodom was most people believe was at the southern portion of the Red Sea. And so to get to where the angels are telling him, it was like a 40-mile trot. He said, I can't make it. I can't get there fast enough. We're going to have to work something out. So Lot, to his credit, bargains with these angels, bargains with God, and said, me and my family can't run there fast enough. If you ask us to do that, we will die. So there's a city that is nearby, a little small, tiny city. Is insignificant to the amount of the other cities, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities. It's a dot on the map. Surely you don't mind if we embark there and hide there and rest there so we will not perish. He says there's a city near enough to flee to. It's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved? Let me go there and be saved. I can't make it to the old country, but I can make it to this little place. In this little place that's so small, and it won't even make a dent in what you're doing over there. It's just insignificant. And so the angel said, behold, I grant you this favor, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly. This is the key part. God is bringing judgment swiftly. They are anxious to carry out what God has called them to do. He said, for I can do nothing until you arrive there. When you arrive there, it's going to be on. Punishment is going to come. The penalty is going to be enacted. And therefore, the name of the city will be called Zor. So the Bible says in 23, the sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zor. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire. Those are acts of judgment. That's God inflicting his wrath. And you got to remember, this is not anyone else doing. This is a wrath inflicted by God himself. And we have to understand is that when we are saved, like Lot and his family, when we are saved from God's wrath. We are not saved from our sin. We are not saved from the devil. We are not saved from this person. When we sin, we offend God and no one else. And because we offend God and because we sin against God, then it is God who if we don't become saved, will inflict his wrath on us. And because of Jesus Christ and because of our belief in him, the wrath of God that we should have gotten has been spared and we receive salvation. And so here, this wrath that's inflicted upon Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot should be included. His family should be included. But through God's grace and mercy, he has been spared and has received salvation. And so it rained on Sodom and Gomorrah. And so it rained and it rained and it poured and poured. Fire coming from the sky. It's a terrible situation. It's coming from heaven. It's non-stop. God is not going to stop until that place is utterly, not utterly destroyed, not a little bit, but utterly destroyed. And he overthrew these cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground. In other words, he destroyed every man, woman, and child. He destroyed every animal, all the cattle, all the livestock. Every single animal was destroyed. Not only was every human being destroyed and every animal destroyed, the Bible says he destroyed everything that grew on the ground. Look at the irony of this. Lot went there because it was so pretty. He went there because he was greedy. He went there because he thought he could make a lot of money. He went there for selfish reasons. Now he's been kicked out of there, and God has destroyed every single thing. Lot is broke. He went in there with a ton of cattle. He went in there rich. Now he's coming out there poor. And we got to be careful of our motivations for what we do. We got to be careful when we go against our conscience is telling us that God is not wanting us to do this, and we do it anyway. We have to be real careful because we're going to reap what we sow. And when we disobey God, when we show that we don't have any fear for God, we, in a way, invite God's wrath into our lives. Oh, we may be spared, but those things around us may not be spared. It may have an effect on our children. It may have an effect on our possessions. They may be gone. We will not come out of there without paying a cost. I'll say this on a personal note. I grew up in Los Angeles, and one of the things that bothered me as a child, I had an uncle, and the uncle, his sister passed away, and she passed away on a very bad side of the town in Los Angeles. And so he went and lived in that house. He brought his two daughters there. And then his two daughters came, and their other half-sisters came, and then everybody made a family there. But he went there not because God told him to be there. He went there because he had a free house. But that part of the town was drug infested. It was gang infested. It was violent. It was terrible. It was a worse place to be. And what ended up happening, my cousin died at 27 because of abuse of cocaine. Her heart just gave out. My other cousin lost her two children because she was deemed an unfit mother. I had a cousin who got accidentally shot in the head. I had another cousin died at 30 because of drug abuse. I had another one died in her 50s because of drug abuse. He lived a long time. He lived well into his 70s. But it was nothing but death around him. Nothing but turmoil around him. Nothing but his family got addicted to drugs. He thought he was getting something for free. He thought he was getting over, but it cost him so much. So it cost Lot too. Because if we look here, despite those implicit instructions that were very clear, that would have scared everybody, scared all the rest of them, but it didn't scare his wife. But Lot's wife behind him looked back and she became a pillar of salt. And that to me makes me think that she may have been part of Sodom because she had a hard time leaving Sodom. And maybe she was looking back because her family was there. Maybe she was looking back for another reason. But whatever it was, maybe she was nosy. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she heard all the fire and brimstone coming down, and it just got the best of her, and she just had to look back. I don't know. Wherever it is, it cost Lot his wife, and it cost his two daughters their mother. Terrible situation. Terrible situation. And then verse 29, it says, so it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out in the midst of the overthrow, and when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Why did God spare Lot? Because he remembered Abraham. Why did God spare Lot? Because of Abraham's favor with God. Why did Lot get spared? Because maybe he was a righteous man at this point, or was going to become a righteous man. I don't know. But here it says, God remembered Abraham. So it has something to do with Abraham and Abraham's relationship with God and a promise that God made to Abraham. And Lot's life was saved in him and his two daughters. What do we learn from this lesson? We are all saved by God's grace and mercy. We all deserve destruction. But it's because God's grace and mercy that we are pulled out of that torment, that sinful lifestyle, that immorality. We're pulled out and we are saved. And here it says God remembered Abraham. And when God saves us, he sees Jesus. And that's why we are saved. What do we learn from here? God does not like sexual immorality of any kind. We learn that here that in their particular sin or aspect of sexual immorality was not adultery, but it was homosexuality. God does not like that. It is in this narrative, we get an impression on how God feels about it. He calls it wickedness. So a lot of people want to say this does not talk about this, does not deal with homosexuality. Yes, it does. It has everything to do with homosexuality. What do we learn from this passage? We learned that sometimes I talked about early on, you think you're getting ahead when in fact that you're not. You think you're getting over on God when in fact you're not. You think I can use this drug and be a child of God and nothing can happen. That's not true. You think I can steal over here, lie over here, do this and do that, hang out, live a carnal lifestyle and not have it affect me, not have God do something to me. If you're a child of God, God has to discipline you. He's not trying to crush you. He's trying to discipline you and put you on the right track. And he puts Lot on the right track. And we hear about Lot later on in the next chapter about an incident between him and his daughters. But after that, we really don't hear anything about him. But we know in Hebrews, he's considered a righteous man. I don't know how that happens, but he is. God knows the heart, and we don't. There must have been a change in Lot's life. And so we have a fantastic lesson here. We need to obey God always. When God gives us an order or a direct order, we need to obey him, and we need to do it just like he tells us to do, or else there will be consequences, because a lot of things come into our life because of our disobedience. And that's why the reason why Lot's wife turned into disobedient, turned into pillar, because she was strictly disobedient, no other reason. And then sometimes God calls us out of a situation to leave those situations or leave those people behind. It may be somebody out there now that God says, you need to get out of Sodom and Gomorrah. You need to get out that place. Wherever you're in, you need to get out of that place. You need to stop hanging around the people that you're hanging around with. You need to stop hanging out in the clubs that you're hanging around in. I'm calling you. You need to leave those material possessions that are becoming idols to you, that are entrapping you. You need to leave those behind. Sometimes God calls us to a new life, and that new life means that we have to leave things behind. Look in our past. Maybe we had to get rid of that job. Maybe even though that job is paying a lot of money, we're making ends meet, but maybe God is calling us. That is not the right job for you. That's not the job I want for you to have as a child of mine. Maybe God is calling you out of something to something. And the question is, are you going to hesitate? Are you going to linger? Are you going to do what God calls you to do? And that's what I think the point is. Are you going to hesitate? Are you going to linger? Are you going to be obedient and do what God has called you to do? Leave those things that you think you have to have. Leave them behind. Well, it's been a great lesson. God bless you. If this lesson has been very helpful to you, hit the like button on Facebook, share it. If you're on YouTube and this lesson has been helpful to you, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the like button. This has been a fantastic lesson. May God bless you. I'll see you next week.